format. It's one of the older ones, but it's like it's some cameras will shoot it as well. Will shoot TIFFs. It's kind of almost like RAW, but not really. It's like a PSD, but not really. You can save vectors in it.
It's kind of that middle ground between like a PSD and like a RAW file.
It's quite often used. It's still often used almost like PSDs. And it has a 4 gig file size limit. And a lot of the time you'll use a TIFF to send off to your printers. So you'll either send a TIFF or a JPEG. It's recommended that you'll send a TIFF to your places like your what are they, domestic kind of print labs, like I don't know, I'm trying to think of one. But, they'll expect a JPEG, whereas, ones like, for example, Atkins and all that, you can either send a JPEG or a TIFF, and they'll, the TIFF you'll be able to push further.
They care about the pixels.
They'll care about your pixels, that's it. The TIFF cares deeply about your pixels. And you can save as layers or as a flat image, much like a JPEG, but it'll keep more all that detail in. So it's almost, it's hard to explain that one. It really is. Okay,
yeah.
So the next one we'll go into is PNG.
Okay, so PNG is another web-based format, mostly used in browsers.
Yeah.
It's a newer format, so they've put a lot of kind of new technology in it, I guess.
Yeah.
So it's a lossless format. So I think when you save it out, you have the option of choosing which compression it uses, maybe.
Yeah.
Not sure on that.
It's kind of like TIFF in that respect, isn't it? It's lossy or lossless. Like, it's kind of both from memory.
Yeah, I think you can actually choose it. Yeah. So one of the main things about a PNG is that you can have transparency. And so if you've got, for example, a logo or something where you've cut out the background and it's no longer got a background, and you want to put that on your website and then change the color of the background behind it.
Yeah.
You can do that.
Yay! That's exciting.
Whereas if you saved it out as a JPEG, it would save with, either a black or a white background behind the image.
Yeah.
That you wouldn't be able to see through to the color behind it on the web page. So that's one of the main uses of PNG. The problem with this, though, is that it doesn't save an alpha channel.
Yeah.
It bakes the transparency into your RGB pixels, which we will be talking about later in the second half of the show.
Yes. And
why this is important.
And there's that gamma correction thing as well, which you would kind of...
All right, yeah.
Yeah.
So PNG has a gamma correction feature in it, which I don't think is really that widely used. But when you save out of Photoshop, Photoshop will include a few little pieces of data in it about the gamma settings of when you made it. So when it's loaded up into a browser like Chrome or Firefox, it will try to recreate the gamma settings that you had in Photoshop when you created it.
Yeah.
And there was an interesting bug in an older version of Internet Explorer where it would calculate the gamma wrong, and so when you load up
Internet Explorer!
any PNG in a website, and it would render like 10% darker than it should be. So if you're trying to match colors between your like CSS or HTML in your website with the colors in the PNG, they wouldn't be the same, even though in Photoshop they've got exactly the same hex values.
Yeah.
In Internet Explorer, it would render like 10% darker. So what you had to do is actually go in manually and delete out all of the gamma information out of the file to get that to render correctly.
Yay! Oh wow, that sucks. Anyway, all right.
Story of pain.
Story of pain. Yeah, Internet Explorer. Okay, I'll stop dissing Internet Explorer. Okay, GIFs. I hate GIFs.
Okay, GIFs.
I'm sorry.
GIFs are, I guess, essentially the joke format.
They only have 256 colors.
It's called paletted color. You can. It essentially takes your 256 most common colors, or averages them out, or does something to choose 256 colors, and then it matches all of the pixels in your image to the closest color on that palette.
So PNG's kind of been made to replace this too, hasn't it? Like that's the idea of
Yes.
the
Yeah.
PNG because it does have like transparency, and that's also baked into the RGB. But
Yep.
it's like it's not as smooth. It has like really bad edges and stuff. It'll only pick one color that will be transparent.
Yeah.
So when yeah, and then
It's almost like chroma key transparency.
yeah. But it's cool because it
Yeah.
does support frame-based animation, and we do have a place in our hearts for GIF with frame-based animation. You know,
And lolcats just wouldn't be the same without the crazy gifs.
exactly. We appreciate GIFs for lolcats. Oh dear. Yes, GIF and lolcats. All right, so we're going to the next one. This is your one. This is your
Yeah,
baby.
this is actually my
Your
favorite
baby.
file form.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
TGA.
this format is actually quite a little bit more technical in some respects,
Bum, bum,
and
bum.
even more basic in other respects. So TGA is a lossless compression. It's quite old, quite an old format, probably even as old or older than TIFF. And you can choose whether you want it completely uncompressed or it has a basic compression. Now, most times you're better off leaving it uncompressed, just for the fact that TGA is mostly used in game textures, where you have a lot of different image files, and they all get compiled into one file, end to end, into a texture package. And then the entire package gets compressed together, and you often achieve much better compression by doing it that way than you would by compressing individual images. So you can actually choose to do that and turn off compression completely. Whereas with JPEG, with PNG, possibly even with TIFF, I don't think you have the option of just completely turning off compression.
I don't know. I'm not sure. That was a moment. Oh, JPEG
Yeah.
sort of does a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah. And TGA preserves transparency like PNG
Yep.
does.
Yep.
So with the main difference being that the transparency is not baked into the RGB channels, you can actually set a separate alpha channel to edit, and then that will save out with the TGA.
Yep.
So you can paint whatever you like in the RGB channels and paint all over the background and everything you want, and then you can essentially use the alpha channel as a layer mask for the entire image.
Yep.
And what's that's used for is particularly in 2D games where you have little sprites running around the screen and you want certain parts of the texture to be transparent. And it also has 256 levels of transparency, so you can get quite a smooth gradient, whereas in a GIF, you've kind of got that like it's either transparent or it's not.
Yep. Yep. Cool.
So yeah. The other main advantage of TGA is quite a technical one.
Yep.
Based on the actual order of the pixels in the file. Most file formats are RGB.
Yep.
You've got your red, green,
CMYK.
blue, and if it has, or CMYK, and
Yep.
if you have an alpha channel, it will be red, green, blue, alpha.
Yep.
And then that's repeated for each pixel. Now, one thing that happens on your video card when it's actually storing all of these images in your video card's RAM is they're actually stored in a different order. They're stored in blue, green, red alpha.
Yep.
And I can't exactly remember what the reasoning for this was, but that's apparently the way it is.
Yep.
And TGA is stored in that same byte order. So if you save a file out as a JPEG or a PNG, you would have to swap the bytes around.
Mm-hmm.
You have to swap the red and the blue channel in order to get it to display correctly. Otherwise, the colors will be all inverted and looks like you're tripping out on acid.
Yep.
So
Yep.
by using a TGA, you actually save yourself that swap.
Yep.
And so it's a lot more efficient when loading up.
Yep.
And so yeah, that's why I love TGA.
There we go. Matt's favourite thing is TGA.
My favorite thing is TGA.
Wicked! Alright, so the next segment, we're done. Yeah,
that pretty much
that
wraps up
setup.
our first segment.
Yeah. So now we're going to talk about our life-saving tips. For us, we thought we'd talk about one that was relatively simple today because I've seen so many people who don't know this. Yeah, so it's basically zooming and panning. Um, so, dun dun dun, the spacebar is like God amongst Photoshop shortcuts. You hold down your spacebar, the little hand appears, and you can just move your picture around instead of using these. Ooh, bugger. Instead of using your scroll bars, the spacebar becomes your scroll bar, pretty much. And you can throw it around. And if you have OpenGL drawing turned on, it'll kind of do this cool throwy, bouncy thing where you won't have to scroll too much. So that's that. And then we have our control, or it's, what is it, command on an Apple? Or the Apple key. I'll call it the Apple key. It's the Apple key, isn't it? That's what they call it.
I'm not sure. I used a Mac in over here.
Yeah. We're special. We talked about this, that we're the special people who don't use them. Anyway, okay, so, and all I'm doing is, at the moment, is holding down control and using my plus and minus keys to zoom in and out. And that's really a simple, easy way. You'll be working on something, you need to zoom out. Oh, there we go. I need to zoom in on that. And that's with your control plus and minus. There was another one we were talking about, wasn't it? It was control 1 for 1:1 pixel ratio. So that's basically, zoomed in at 100% right now. And then if you want to fit it to your screen, you go control 0 and it then will fit your image to the screen. So that's so handy. I use that constantly.
Just one thing I'd like to put in. Control Alt Scroll. Scroll wheel.
Control Alt Scroll. Oh yeah, that's it. Yeah, that one. And that zooms in on a point, doesn't it?
Yep. Zooms in wherever your mouse is.
Yeah. So as you can see,
So
my mouse is over there.
You put your mouse on his nose. You can scroll right into his nose.
Yep. And yeah, that's a handy one, actually. I like that a lot. If you've got a graphics tablet too, you also have you generally will have a little scroll wheel on it, which is always handy and cool, although it can be a little bit painful at times. So there's that one. And there's also the other one I've always been taught is down in the corner here. You have your what percentage things are at. So, for example, I'm going to type in 100%, and there we go, it goes in at 100%. I was always told, and I don't know, basically to edit at kind of quarters, if that makes sense. So, when you're editing, you work at 50%, you work at 50, 25, 70 something, 75 and 100. And that's just so, that's so you can see kind of true pixels. That was just something, if that makes sense.
You're not displaying like half pixels.
Yeah, that's it.
It's a lot closer to what it would actually display as.
Yeah, because at the moment when I'm zooming and when I'm at, for example, the 33, it's sort of kind of making up bits and bobs and trying to guess what it would look like. Whereas at the at that 25% mark, it's kind of just halving the pixels, really. I'm not really explaining that too well. Sorry, that was But anyway, we get the idea. So that's our special tips segment. That was it. Yeah, we're done, I think.
Yeah.
Unless you've got anything to add, Matt.
No, that's pretty much covered everything there.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll move straight along into Photoshop for Crazy Nerds.
Photoshop for Crazy Nerds. Yay. So today we're going to talk about our channels palette. So most photographers, and I don't know about you, Matt, but because you gaming guys open this up a lot, this is like your kind of bread and butter, really.
Yeah.
But a lot of photographers don't. I don't know why they don't. They sort of believe that they're kind of exempt from the channels palette. You're not. I'm going to tell you off and cry. So I'm using this image just because it's a really great example and really easy to explain this. So should I I'll start off with selections and stuff like that. We'll go back to that. So your channels palette should be located here, but if you can't find it, just go to Window and Channels and tick that thing there. And you'll see in here we have the RGB, which is kind of like, Matt was talking about RGB before. So your red, green, and blue channel all together is what we're viewing. Then when I click on the red channel, that's basically the opacity. Matt, you've better explain this than me.
The intensity?
Yeah, the intensity
of that essentially, on a scale from black to white, how much red there is in the image.
Exactly, there we go.
With black being none, white being all red.
Yeah, Cool, and so here we go, and then you can see as I go from each different one, and I might paint on something here as well. So I'm going to go back to my default over here in my black and white, so by hitting D on my keyboard, I'm going to scribble some stuff in. And you'll see when we go back to RGB, because I've scribbled black onto my blue channel, it's taken